Old papers don't scare me, Victor Hale said, laughing in front of the whole room. Owen placed the first ledger on the town hall table, then the map, then the brass collar Ranger had found under the caravan floor. The laughter thinned. You expect us to believe a broke veteran and a dog uncovered a town secret? Hale asked. Owen met his eyes. No, I expect the records to speak for themselves. Ranger sat beside the evidence, still as stone. Nobody moved. Hale had buried the truth for 19 years. He never imagined it would come back inside a $20 Caravan. Owen Mercer had learned, over 20 years of uniforms, bad roads, and temporary bridges, that a thing could look finished long before it was. A cracked beam could still carry weight. A rusted hinge could still swing clean if you worked oil into the joint. A man could stand in the middle of a county auction with dust on his boots, 42 years behind his eyes, and still not be as broken as the town had decided he was. Mercy Bend, Kansas, sat under a pale September sun that made every windshield flash white and every weed along the auction yard look made of wire. The old fairground had been turned into a storage lot for county leftovers. Dented filing cabinets, farm gates, a soda machine with no cord, 3 church pews, and at the far end, half hidden beside a sagging fence, the old pioneer caravan. Owen saw it before the auctioneer called it. Ranger saw it first. The German shepherd stood beside Owen's left knee, still as a carved shadow, ears lifted toward the wagon bed. He did not bark. He did not pull. He simply watched that ruined caravan with the grave attention he used to give locked doors and buried cables back when both of them still belonged to the army in one way or another. Easy, Owen murmured, though the word was more for himself. The caravan looked like something a storm had forgotten to finish. Its canvas cover had rotted into gray ribbons along the hoops. One rear wheel leaned inward, tired and embarrassed, the iron tire loose around the rim. The sideboards were bleached pale by years of Kansas heat. Someone had painted Prairie Trail Days across the flank once, but the letters had faded until they looked less like a name than a memory trying not to disappear. A few men from town stood near the folding table where Deputy Grace Weller handled the papers. They had already bought the useful things. Tools, cabinets, scrap metal, things with obvious value. Nobody stepped toward the caravan. Nobody except Ranger, who eased forward, nose low, and stopped at the back step. He breathed along the seam of the floorboards, then looked up at Owen with those steady brown eyes that had pulled Owen through darker rooms than this one. Across the yard, someone gave a short laugh. That dog's got expensive taste, Mercer. Owen knew the voice. Travis Bell, who owned half the rental garages in town and liked people better when they owed him money. Another man said, a match and a gallon of gas would fix that thing. A few chuckles followed, dry as gravel. Owen kept his face calm. He had gotten good at that. Calm when a landlord slid a notice under his door. Calm when a boss called him, not a team player, because he would not sign a report he knew was false. Calm when strangers thanked him for his service with one hand and moved his application to the bottom of the pile with the other. Ranger's tail moved once, not wagging, just marking the air. The auctioneer rubbed his forehead with the back of his wrist. Last item. Historical caravan from the old museum annex. County makes no warranty. Buyer responsible for removal. He tried for a bright tone and failed. Opening at 200. Silence. A meadowlark called from somewhere beyond the fence. 100. The men looked at their boots. 50. Deputy Weller glanced at Owen. Then at the dog, as if she had already guessed where this was going. The auctioneer sighed. $20, and I don't ever want to see it again. Owen felt the folded bills in his pocket. $31 total. Enough for 2 cheap meals, maybe 3 if he skipped coffee. Enough for a bus ticket out of Mercy Bend if he stopped pretending he had a reason to stay. But Ranger had placed one paw on the caravan step now, gentle as a question. Owen walked closer. Under the split pine and weather stain, he saw the bones, oak crossbeams darkened by age, hand-forged brackets still thick beneath rust, a frame made by someone who had measured twice because the road west did not forgive careless work. His father would have noticed that. His father would have run a thumb along the joint and said, "Don't insult a thing before you know what it's carried." Owen looked at the caravan, then at the town watching him watch it. He felt no grand hope, no sudden miracle opening in his chest. Only a small, stubborn pressure behind the ribs. The kind that said stand. The kind that said this, at least, can still be saved. 20, he said. The word landed clean in the hot air. Deputy Weller paused, pen above the receipt. You sure? Owen almost smiled. No, Mom. Ranger looked up at him. But he is. The laughter came again, softer this time, uncertain around the edges. Owen handed over the bill. The paper left his fingers light, but the choice settled on him with weight. By sunset, he would still have no room to return to. By morning, he would need a way to move a broken caravan with a crippled wheel. None of that changed what he had just bought. Not shelter exactly. Not yet, but the beginning of a place that belonged to no banker, no landlord, no man with a soft voice and a false report. As Deputy Weller tore off the receipt, Ranger lowered his nose once more to the floor seam and gave a quiet, almost human breath. Beneath those warped boards, sealed under dust, oilcloth, and 19 years of silence, something waited. Owen Mercer had paid $20 for a wreck nobody wanted. He did not know he had just bought the truth. Mercy Bend had spent half a generation learning how not to see. Owen did not sleep much that night. He sat on the curb outside Bell's garage with Ranger pressed against his boot, the auction receipt folded into the pocket of his work shirt, the old Pioneer Caravan waiting 2 miles away in the county yard like a promise too heavy to carry. The room he had rented behind the garage was already empty. A duffel bag, a rolled blanket, a shaving kit, 2 clean shirts, and the walnut folding rule his father had left him. That was Owen Mercer's estate at 42. He held the old rule in both hands and opened it one brass-jointed section at a time. The wood had darkened from years of sweat and sawdust. Near the first hinge, his father's careful knife work still showed. Measure twice. Cut once. Treat people the same. Owen had been 12 when he first read those words and too young to understand the last part. Back then his father, Daniel Mercer, worked out of a narrow shop behind their house in St. Joseph, Missouri. He built porch steps, cabinet doors, storm windows, bookshelves for women who saved money in coffee cans, and kitchen tables for men who apologized for paying late. Daniel never looked at a customer's boots before deciding how much respect to give. He looked at the work. Wood tells you what happened to it, he used to say. People do too if you stop making up your mind before they speak. Owen learned grain before he learned algebra. Oak held memory in tight lines. Pine bruised easy. Walnut took polish like quiet pride. He learned to test a beam with his palm, to listen for hollow places, to smell old water trapped inside a wall. Later in the army, those lessons changed shape but not meaning. He became the man sent ahead to judge whether a road would hold, whether a bridge could carry weight, whether a cracked support was dangerous or only scarred. His hands knew stress before his mouth had to explain it. Ranger came into his life near the end, not as a gift, not as a cure, but as a partner nobody needed to introduce. The dog had been trained for search work, steady around noise, patient with waiting, sharp with hidden things. He noticed buried wire, sealed boxes, fresh paint over old trouble. He also noticed when Owen's breathing went thin in crowded rooms, and he would lean against Owen's leg with the full, warm weight of his body until the room became a room again. When Owen left the service, people told him he would have no trouble finding work. Men with discipline always landed on their feet, they said. Men with skills were needed everywhere. It sounded true enough until every application became a small performance of being fine. Fine with low pay, fine with odd hours, fine with people thanking him too loudly, then trusting him too little. He patched roofs, repaired fences, rewired sheds, hauled lumber, fixed things other men had called finished. He did not mind hard work. He minded the way some people studied him when they thought he could not see it, as if looking for the crack that would prove their caution wise. Mercy Bend had taken him in the way a shelf takes in a tool it does not plan to use. Hale Land and Trust hired him because he could read structures and write clean reports. For a while, that felt like a handhold. A desk, a clipboard, a company truck some afternoons, enough money for rent behind Bell's garage. Ranger had a patch of shade by the bay door. Owen had coffee at Louise Harper's diner every Friday and almost let himself believe he had stopped drifting. Then Victor Hale asked him to sign the inspection on the Ash Creek houses. Owen had walked those porches himself. Old, yes. Weathered, yes, but not doomed. The floors needed bracing, the roofs needed patching, a few sills needed replacing. Repair, not removal. Hale smiled when Owen said so, that smooth civic smile Mercy Bend seemed to trust. You're thinking like a carpenter, Hale told him. I need you to think like a professional. Owen remembered his father's rule in his pocket. Measure twice, cut once, treat people the same. He pushed the paper back unsigned. By noon the next day, his hours were gone. By supper, Bell wanted the room cleared. By dark, Ranger had become the only living thing in town that looked at him without revision. Now, under the September night, Owen closed the folding rule and slid it back into his shirt pocket. Across the road, the garage windows reflected him faintly. A tired man, a good dog, a bag at his feet. He felt the shame first, hot and useless. Then grief, quieter, then something harder to name. Not hope, not yet. More like the square edge of a board under his palm, proof that a straight line could still be found. Ranger lifted his head toward the county yard, though it was too far to see. Owen followed his gaze anyway. Somewhere in the dark sat the Caravan nobody wanted. A ruined thing with strong bones. Owen knew what that felt like. The trouble began in a room that smelled too clean. Lemon oil on the conference table, new carpet, cold coffee in a silver pot nobody touched. Hale Land and Trust kept its office on Main Street, between the bank and the pharmacy, with tall windows facing the courthouse lawn. From the sidewalk it looked honest. Framed survey maps on cream walls, a brass nameplate, a flag in the corner. Men like Victor Hale understood the value of surfaces. Owen stood at the end of the table with a folder under one arm, while Ranger waited outside in the shade of the company truck, watching through the glass as if he already disliked the room. Victor Hale sat with his hands folded, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest work without proving any. He was 55, silver at the temples, soft-voiced, the kind of man who remembered everyone's first name when a camera was nearby. "I appreciate speed, Owen," he said, tapping the inspection report. "The council meets Friday. Ash Creek Landing needs a clean path forward." Owen looked down at the paper. "Unsafe for continued occupancy. Economically irreparable. Recommended clearance." The sentences sat there in neat black type, each one more polished than true. He had walked those houses the day before. 12 small structures near Ash Creek, built for rail workers back when Mercy Bend still heard trains at night. Weather had worked on them. Time had leaned against them. But the beams held. The roofs could be patched. The porches needed bracing, not condemnation. "This isn't my report," Owen said. Hale smiled almost kindly. "It's the report we need." Owen opened his own notes and laid them beside the typed version. Pencil marks, measurements, photographs, a list of repairs by priority. 3 houses need sill work, 2 need roof decking, 1 needs new stairs. None need to be cleared. Hale's smile thinned, not vanished. Just tightened, like a door closing without sound. "You're thinking with your heart." "No, sir. With a tape measure." The room went quiet. A clock clicked above the framed map of Ash Creek, dividing the silence into small, usable pieces. Hale leaned back. "A development like this brings jobs, tax money, new life. Sometimes progress asks us to stop romanticizing decay." Owen thought of Ranger outside, one ear lifted. Thought of the old people he had seen sitting on those porches, not begging for charity, just wanting the place they had paid for to be called real. Calling something decay doesn't make it dead. Hale slid a pen across the table. It stopped against Owen's folder. "Sign the clearance summary. I'll attach your field notes internally. No one loses sleep. You get full-time status next month. Benefits, better housing, stability." There it was, offered without heat. Not a threat, a bridge, or what looked like one until you tested the span. Owen touched the walnut rule in his shirt pocket. His father's words pressed through the cloth like a second pulse. "Measure twice, cut once, treat people the same." He pushed the pen back. "I can't sign what I didn't find." Hale watched him for a long moment, disappointed in the way powerful men get disappointed when a smaller man refuses to become useful. "That's unfortunate." "It is. You understand this may affect your contract." Owen gathered his papers. His hands stayed steady, though something inside him had gone hollow and cold. "I understand." By noon his company email no longer opened. By 2, the truck keys were requested. By 4, Travis Bell had a message waiting at the garage. Owen's room was needed for storage, effective immediately. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just a series of small official endings, each one carrying Victor Hale's clean fingerprints without showing them. When Owen came back to the garage, Ranger met him at the bay door and pressed his head under Owen's palm. Bell stood by the office, avoiding his eyes with the practiced sorrow of a man who had chosen convenience and wanted credit for regret. "Nothing personal," Bell said. Owen nodded once. That phrase had a smell to it now. Lemon oil, new carpet, cold coffee. He packed before sunset. The room had never held much, but emptying it still hurt. A folded blanket, 2 shirts. A razor, the walnut rule. Ranger's worn leash. Outside, Mercy Bend kept moving around him. Trucks rolling past, diner lights clicking on. Courthouse flag breathing in the warm September wind. Owen felt anger come and go like weather over dry ground. Beneath it sat something steadier. A refusal, maybe. Or a line he had not crossed, which meant he still knew where he stood. Morning came warm and colorless. The kind of Kansas morning that offered no comfort and made no apology. Owen washed his face in the restroom sink at Bell's garage, dried it with a paper towel, rough enough to leave his skin red, then stepped outside with his duffel over one shoulder, and Ranger pacing at his side. He had nowhere to be, which felt worse than being late. Mercy Bend was already awake. The bakery door stood open. A delivery truck coughed beside the pharmacy. Men in clean shirts crossed Main Street carrying coffee, moving through lives that still had keys, schedules, chairs waiting for them at the end of the day. Owen kept walking. He did not want pity before breakfast. The county auction sat at the old fairground beyond the rodeo fence, where bindweed climbed the posts and dust gathered in the tire tracks like flour. A hand-painted sign said Canty Surplus Sale, though most of what lay behind it looked less like surplus than surrender. Broken desks, rusted filing cabinets, a row of metal folding chairs bent at the legs, a glass display case from the closed museum annex. Things the county had stored too long to remember why they mattered. Deputy Grace Weller stood behind a card table, writing receipts in a square, careful hand. She saw Owen coming, then saw the duffel, then politely looked at Ranger instead. That small Mercy told Owen something about her. "Morning, Mercer," she said. "Morning. You buying or just looking?" Owen glanced over the yard. "Depends what still has bones." Grace gave the tired half-smile of someone who had watched men pay too much for junk and too little for history. "Then you may be the only customer we've got left." The auction moved fast. A farmer bought the gates. A mechanic bought the cabinets for parts. The old museum display case went to a woman opening an antique shop in Junction City. Owen stayed near the back, not bidding, one hand resting on Ranger's head when the dog leaned close. Then the auctioneer pointed toward the far fence. Last item. Pioneer-style caravan from the Mercy Bend Museum Annex, used in Prairie Trail Days parades, historical displays, school tours before the annex shut down. Buyer removes. Owen turned. There it was again, worse in daylight. The old Pioneer caravan sagged on the dry ground with its rear wheel canted inward, its canvas cover torn into strips that stirred whenever the wind passed. The painted letters along the side had faded to ghosts. The front bench was cracked, one iron step hung loose. A wasp nest, empty now, clung beneath the brake handle like a paper heart. "Opening at 200, the auctioneer said. Nobody moved. Someone snorted. Travis Bell, standing near the tool pile with a paper cup in his hand, said, "That thing belongs in a ditch." Owen heard it. He let the words pass. Ranger did not. The dog stepped forward, slow and certain, and fixed on the caravan's back end. His nose lowered to the floor seam. His shoulders tightened, not in alarm, but in concentration. Owen knew that posture. Ranger had found something his mind could not leave alone. 100, the auctioneer tried. Silence. 50. A fly circled the receipt book. Grace shifted her weight and looked at the caravan with open embarrassment, as if responsible for its loneliness. $20, she said finally, cutting through the auctioneer's routine. 20, and the county stops feeding weeds around it. A few men laughed. Owen walked to the caravan and set his hand on the sideboard. The wood left gray dust on his palm. He pushed gently. The frame answered with a low creak, but not a collapse. Beneath the weathered pine, the oak crosspieces held firm. The brackets were ugly with rust, but thick. The wheel was bad, yes, but wheels could be rebuilt. Canvas could be replaced. Rot could be cut away. He had seen men give up on better things for worse reasons. Ranger placed one paw on the rear step and looked back at him. Not begging, waiting. Owen reached in his pocket and drew out one of the last bills he had. $20. A small amount, unless it was nearly all you had. He felt the foolishness of it, hot under his collar. Then he felt something else under that, quieter and straighter. A man without a room buying a ruined caravan because his dog trusted the floor. It sounded like a joke Mercy Bend would enjoy for weeks. Owen handed the bill to Grace. Sold, the auctioneer said too quickly, relieved to be done with it. Grace wrote the receipt. You'll need help moving it, I know. That wheel won't make it to the road. I know that too. She tore the receipt free and held it out. Her eyes flicked once to his duffel, then back to his face. Still, she said, softer now, it's yours. The words struck deeper than Owen expected. Yours, not borrowed, not rented, not conditional on a contract, a landlord, or Victor Hale's opinion. Owen folded the receipt and slid it behind the walnut rule in his pocket. Ranger remained by the Caravan, nose close to that same narrow seam in the floorboards, breathing in dust, oil, and something old enough to have learned patience. Owen stood beside him under the bright, indifferent sky and looked at the wreck he had just bought. For the first time since Hale's office, the ground beneath him felt like it might hold. By late afternoon, Owen understood the Caravan was his in name only until he found someone who could make the rear wheel honest again. Ownership did not move oak, iron, and dead weight across 2 miles of county road. He stood behind it with both hands on his hips while Ranger lay in the thin shade beneath the wagon bed, nose still turned toward that strange seam in the floor. Deputy Weller had let him keep it in the yard one more night, but Mercy, like storage space, had limits. Owen knew one person in Mercy Bend who might look at the wheel and see more than junk. Mara Whitcomb's restoration shop sat beyond the feed store, where Main Street gave up its sidewalks and turned into a 2-lane road lined with cottonwoods. The sign out front had once read Whitcomb Historic Woodwork, but sun had eaten half the paint, leaving historic wood faint and stubborn above the door. Inside, the shop smelled of linseed oil, old varnish, and sawdust warmed by afternoon heat. Chair frames hung from rafters. A church lectern waited on sawhorses. Wagon spokes leaned in a barrel like dry bones arranged with care. Mara stood at the workbench, scraping paint from a window sash with slow, patient strokes. She was 39, maybe 40, with dark hair tied back by a red bandana and hands marked by small cuts she no longer noticed. She looked up when Ranger entered first, then Owen behind him with his hat in one hand and the county receipt in the other. If Bell sent you about that cabinet, tell him old Glue doesn't hurry because he does, she said. Bell didn't send me. Good. I like you better already. Owen almost smiled. The almost surprised him. He laid the receipt on the bench. I bought the old Prairie Trail Caravan. Mara stopped scraping. Not dramatically. Just one clean pause, blade held above the wood. Why $20? That explains the price, not the why. Ranger moved through the shop, calm but intent, sniffing the spoke barrel, the floor, the lower shelf where metal fittings sat in coffee cans. Mara watched him with more respect than most people gave men. Owen noticed. Rear wheel is split at the hub. Iron tire's loose. I need it moved to the county strip by Ash Creek. I can pay some now. Not enough. I can work the rest off. Mara set the scraper down. Her eyes shifted from the receipt to his duffel outside the open door, then back to his face. She did not ask the question people asked when they wanted the pleasure of hearing the answer. What kind of work? Roof patch. Fence repair. That north wall is taking water near the sill. Your gutter drops wrong. Her mouth tightened, but not with offense. With recognition. You looked at my building for 12 seconds. Long enough. For the first time, she gave him a real look. Not the town's quick glance, the one that sorted a man by rumor and pocket money, a measuring look. Fair, not soft. You know wagons? I know load. I know wood. My father knew the rest. Something in that answer changed the air between them. Mara wiped her hands on a rag and walked toward the door. Show me. They took her old flatbed out to the fairground, Ranger riding between them with his head near the open window. Owen expected questions about Hale, about the room behind Bell's garage, about why a grown man with a service record and a good dog had spent nearly his last cash on a wreck. Mara asked none of them. She asked about the wheel, about the frame, about where the Caravan had been stored. Practical questions. Kind ones because they left his pride standing. At the county yard, she crouched by the damaged rear wheel and ran her fingers over the cracked hub. Hickory spokes, she said. Badly weathered, not hopeless. She tapped the iron tire. Loose, but original. Whoever built this cared. Owen felt those words settle into him. He had thought the same thing, but hearing Mara say it made the thought less foolish. Ranger stepped onto the rear plank and lowered his nose again. Mara noticed. He's fixed on that floor. Since yesterday. She climbed into the wagon bed, careful where she placed her boots. Dust rose around her ankles. She pressed her heel on one plank, then another, listening. When she reached the board Ranger had chosen, the sound changed, low and tight, a note with a secret inside it. Mara looked at Owen. "You buy strange things, Mercer, so I'm told. Might be storage damage, might be old repair." She glanced at Ranger, who had gone perfectly still. Might not. They did not pry it up, not yet. The sun had started to drop and the wheel had to come first. Mara stood, brushed dust from her palms and nodded once. "I'll help you move it. You fix my roof, reset the gutter, and rebuild the back fence before the October rains. Done, and you don't touch that floor without me." Owen looked at Ranger, then at the weathered boards under his paws. For the first time in 2 days, he felt the shape of partnership. Not rescue, not charity, but two people standing beside the same broken thing and agreeing it deserved careful hands. "Done," he said again. Mara held out her hand. Her grip was dry, strong, and exact. Behind them, the old Pioneer Caravan creaked softly in the warm evening wind. No longer quite abandoned, not yet saved. Waiting for the right pressure in the right place. The next morning, the Caravan came apart slowly. The way old things do when they have waited years for someone careful enough to listen. Mara arrived before the heat lifted, carrying a canvas tool roll and 2 tin cups of coffee from Louise Harper's diner. Owen had already jacked the rear axle and set blocks beneath the frame. Ranger lay under the back step, not sleeping. His nose pointed toward the same narrow seam between the floorboards. Dust clung to his muzzle. "He stayed there all night?" Mara asked. Owen tightened the jack handle one more turn. "Near enough." She crouched beside the dog. Ranger looked at her, then back at the plank, patient but firm, as if people were useful creatures who only needed time to understand. Mara set her coffee on the grass. "All right, Scoutmaster, we'll look." They began with the wheel, because work had its own order. Mara knocked the iron tire loose with a rawhide mallet, while Owen held the rim steady. The sound rang through the empty fairground, dull at first, then cleaner as the metal gave way. They pulled the split hub free, marked the surviving spokes, sorted what could be reused from what had gone soft with rot. Owen liked the way Mara worked. No wasted motion, no dramatic sighing over damage. She named the problem, then gave her hands to the repair. By noon, sweat had darkened Owen's shirt between the shoulders, and the smell of warm oak rose from the caravan bed. Ranger stood, shook dust from his coat, and climbed in. He did not wander. He went straight to the front left plank near the axle brace and pressed his nose against it. A low sound came from his chest, not a growl, a plea. Owen wiped his hands on a rag. Now Mara listened to the dog, then to the faint hollow note beneath the board when she tapped it with the handle of her chisel. Now, Owen slid the pry bar into the seam. The first plank came up hard, nails complaining in long rusty squeals. Beneath it lay nothing unusual but joist and shadow. The second plank fought harder. The third plank, Ranger's plank, did not fit the way it should. Its nails were old, but not the same age as the others. The grain ran close enough to fool a passing eye, yet not close enough to fool a carpenter's hand. Owen leaned his weight into the bar. The board lifted with a soft crack of dried pitch. Under it was not open frame. A sheet of dark oilcloth stretched tight across a shallow compartment, its edges tucked beneath narrow cleats. Mara inhaled once, very quietly. The kind of breath a person takes when a room inside them changes shape. Owen looked at her. She nodded. He hooked 2 fingers under the oilcloth and peeled it back. The smell rose first, paper gone old, leather sealed too long, metal touched by time, and a faint trace of cedar as dry as memory. Inside the hidden space lay 2 oilcloth-wrapped ledgers, a rolled map tied with faded blue cord, a packet of deeds in a cracked leather envelope, and a small walnut box no bigger than a loaf of bread. Nobody spoke. Even Ranger had gone still. Front paws braced on either side of the open compartment. Owen lifted the ledgers first. Their covers had survived better than they should have, dark and stiff, each marked in careful gold letters. Mercy Bend Homestead Relief Fund. Mara took the map and unrolled one corner. Ash Creek appeared in brown ink, the old rail spur beside it. Parcels numbered by hand. "This is land registry work," she said, "not museum decoration." Owen opened the leather envelope. Deeds, receipts, transfer notices. Margins filled with notes in a woman's precise handwriting. Dates from 19 years earlier. Names Owen recognized from mailboxes, diner talk, faded signs on closed shops. Then he reached for the walnut box. Ranger moved closer. Owen lifted the lid. Inside, resting on folded canvas, lay a worn leather collar with a brass plate darkened almost black. He rubbed it once with his thumb until the engraving surfaced, Scout. Beside it sat a small metal plaque, no larger than a man's palm, scratched but readable. No one is surplus. Mara turned away for a moment and looked across the fairground, blinking against something the dust could not explain. Owen felt the words enter him slowly, not like a slogan, like a hand placed flat against the chest. Ranger lowered his nose to the collar and breathed it in with solemn recognition, as if one working dog had found the echo of another across the years. Owen set the collar back with care. The caravan no longer felt like a broken object, it felt occupied. Not by ghosts exactly, but by unfinished duty. Mara rolled the map closed and looked down at the open floor. Whatever this is, somebody hid it to keep it safe. Owen touched the edge of the ledger, feeling the old leather warm under his hand, or to make sure the right person found it. Ranger sat between them, ears high, guarding the hollow he had refused to forget. Outside, Mercy Bend went on with its ordinary afternoon, unaware that under a ruined caravan floor, its buried account had finally been opened. Owen did not open the ledgers at the fairground. Some things asked for a table, a lamp, and hands clean enough not to smudge what time had spared. Mara wrapped the papers again, tighter this time, and they carried everything to her shop in a milk crate, lined with old towels. Ranger walked so close to Owen's knee his shoulder brushed denim every few steps. The dog did not like the box being out of his sight. Neither did Owen. That evening, under the yellow bulb above Mara's workbench, the past began to speak in ink. The first ledger belonged to the Mercy Bend Homestead Relief Fund, dated 19 years earlier. The handwriting was neat, narrow, and patient. Eleanor Briggs, treasurer. Thomas Briggs, field coordinator. Each page held names, parcels, repairs, small loans, repayment notes, donated lumber, roof tin, seed money, legal filing fees. Not charity tossed from above. Help given eye to eye. Owen ran one finger down the columns and felt his throat tighten for reasons he could not quickly name. These were not rich people. They were ranch hands, railmen, widows, mechanics, diner cooks, men back from service with bad knees and quiet rooms. People one missed payment away from being spoken of in past tense. Mara unfolded the map of Ash Creek and pinned its corners with chisels. Parcel numbers matched the ledger. Some names had been crossed out later in red pencil. Beside them, in a different hand, were notes: late fee, title correction, administrative transfer, forfeiture pending. That's Hale language, Mara said. Owen looked up. She was pale around the mouth. His father's office used those words when the museum lost the annex. The leather envelope held copies of deeds, letters from landowners asking why their balances had changed, and drafts of complaints never filed. At the bottom lay a sealed letter addressed simply, "To whoever still believes poor is not the same as dishonest." Owen opened it with the point of Mara's smallest knife. Eleanor's voice came through at once, calm on the surface and strained underneath. She and Thomas had started the fund after the old rail spur closed, when Mercy Bend began shedding people the way dry wood sheds bark. The Caravan had been their mobile office. They took it down farm roads and along Ash Creek, carrying forms, coffee, a folding table, and Scout, their German shepherd, who slept under the steps while people told the truth they were ashamed to say at the bank. Then Victor Hale, young then but already polished, offered to modernize the paperwork. He spoke of efficiency, protection, proper filings. Fees appeared, dates shifted, tiny debts grew teeth. Land that should have stayed with tired but honest owners slid, paper by paper, toward companies linked to the Hale family. Eleanor found the pattern. Thomas copied records at night. They hid duplicates beneath the Caravan floor because the town trusted Hale more than it trusted anyone who wore patched sleeves. The final pages were not dramatic. That made them worse. Eleanor wrote that their fund had been accused of mismanagement. Donors stepped away. The bank refused cooperation. Friends stopped waving first. She and Thomas left Mercy Bend with their names bent out of shape, hoping one day the records would return and stand straighter than rumor. Owen set the letter down. For a while only the shop fan spoke. Ranger rested his chin beside Scout's old collar, eyes half closed but watchful. Mara touched the metal plaque with one thumb. "No one is surplus." They weren't hiding treasure, she said. Owen looked at the ledger, at the map, at the careful proof of lives measured and dismissed. "No," he said. They were hiding respect. And in that small shop, with sawdust on the floor and night pressed against the windows, Owen understood the caravan had not been waiting for an owner. It had been waiting for a witness. They kept the ledgers wrapped in oilcloth and locked in Mara's bottom drawer, not from fear, but from respect. Proof that had waited 19 years deserved patience, so they worked first on what stood in front of them. The old pioneer caravan, leaning in the county yard with its wounded wheel and sunburned boards, still holding its silence like a person not ready to speak in public. Owen rebuilt the rear hub under Mara's eye, shaving new hickory until each spoke seated clean. Mara heated the iron tire at her shop, set it over the rim, and cooled it with water that hissed into steam and left the metal gripping like a firm handshake. Ranger watched from the shade, Scout's old collar resting in the wooden box beside him whenever they brought the papers out to study. By the third day, the caravan could roll. By the fifth, it stood on the county strip near Ash Creek, beneath cottonwoods whose leaves flashed silver in the afternoon wind. Owen slept inside it before it was ready, because ready was a luxury and dry was enough. The first night, rain tapped through 3 places in the torn canvas. He set cups beneath the leaks, lay on his blanket with Ranger against his ribs, and listened to water find every weakness. In the morning, he marked each drip with pencil. Nothing about that discouraged him. A leak was only a truth made visible. Mara found a roll of heavy canvas in the back of her shop, cream-colored and stiff with age, still good. Owen patched the roof hoops, reset 2 braces, replaced the worst floor planks, but left the hidden compartment intact beneath a clean, removable panel. A house ought to remember what it was built around, Mara said, and Owen agreed. Word traveled the way it does in small towns, sideways and dressed as curiosity. People came first to stare. Ben Alder from the hardware store leaned on the fence and said he had a coffee can of square nails if Owen could use them. Louise Harper brought 2 ham sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and pretended she had made too many. Franklin Reed, a retired rail worker with a bent straw hat and a careful walk, stood by the creek for nearly 10 minutes before speaking. His family name appeared in one of Eleanor's ledgers. When Owen told him that, the old man took off his hat and held it against his chest, not sad exactly, but struck by the weight of being remembered correctly. After that, the caravan stopped being a spectacle. It became a place. Nora Pike from the county library brought copies of old maps. Mara set up a folding table under the cottonwoods. Owen made coffee in a dented pot. People arrived with questions folded in envelopes, deeds browned at the edges, tax notices they had never understood, stories they had once been told to drop because nothing could be done. Ranger moved among them gently, accepting a hand on his head, then returning to the caravan steps like a quiet guard. Owen noticed how many people lowered their voices when talking about money or lost land, as if hardship were a stain. He began answering each person the way his father had answered customers in patched coats, squarely, without hurry, without making them feel small for needing help. The caravan's fresh canvas glowed in the late sun. Its iron fittings shone black after Mara cleaned them. The faded Prairie Trail Days letters still showed beneath the new oil, and Owen refused to paint over them. That old name mattered, so did the scars. One evening after the last visitor left, Mara found Owen sanding the back step by lantern light. "You know this isn't just your shelter anymore," she said. Owen looked at the table, the maps, Ranger asleep beside Scout's box, and the creek moving dark beyond the grass. "No," he said. "I guess it's becoming a place where people can bring what nobody would hear." Mara nodded. "That's rarer than a roof." Owen ran his palm over the smoothed wood. For the first time in weeks, he did not feel like a man camping at the edge of town. He felt like someone building a doorway. By the time Mercy Bend gathered for the Ash Creek Landing presentation, the caravan had already changed the shape of the town without asking permission. People who had not spoken to one another in years now stood under the same cottonwoods comparing dates on old tax notices. Men who once laughed at Owen from the auction yard had begun slowing their trucks when they passed the creek, not waving exactly, but not looking away either. Victor Hale noticed. Men like him always noticed a shift in weather before rain touched the ground. The town hall sat above the old fire station, with ceiling fans that clicked on every third turn, and folding chairs arranged in rows too straight to be comfortable. Hale stood near the front in a navy jacket, smiling beside a painted rendering of Ash Creek Landing. Clean sidewalks, glass front shops, a walking trail, bright families that looked as if no bill had ever surprised them. Renewal, he said. Opportunity, a future Mercy Bend deserves. Owen stood in the back with Ranger at his left side and felt the old pull to disappear. Rooms full of people still made his chest tighten, not from fear, but from the labor of being seen incorrectly. Mara touched his sleeve once, brief and steady. Nora Pike held the copied records in a banker's box against her hip. Franklin Reed sat in the second row, hat in his lap, his thumb moving along the brim as if sanding down an old hurt. Hale clicked to another slide. The Ash Creek properties have been reviewed by qualified inspectors and deemed beyond practical repair. A few council members nodded. Owen felt every word of that sentence land where Hale intended it, on his back. Ranger looked up at him, calm as a handrail. Owen walked forward. The room quieted in pieces. First the back rows, then the council table. Then Hale, whose smile stayed in place but lost its warmth. "Mr. Mercer," Hale said, pleasant enough for witnesses. "This portion is for scheduled remarks." Owen set the first ledger on the table. The sound was small. The room heard it anyway. "Then schedule the truth." Mara placed the map beside it. Nora set down deed copies, transfer notices, and Eleanor Briggs' letters sealed in a clear sleeve. Franklin rose slowly and added his own faded notice, the one that had pushed his family off Ash Creek land 19 years before. No one shouted. That made it harder to dismiss. Nora spoke first, her librarian's voice plain and merciless. She showed matching parcel numbers, altered dates, duplicate fees, transfers routed through companies tied to the Hale family. Mara explained the hidden compartment, the age of the wood, the original cleats beneath the floor. Franklin did not accuse. He only read the amount his father had paid, then the fee that appeared after the balance was settled. His voice shook once, then steadied. Hale tried to laugh. It came out thin. A box of old paper found by a disgruntled former contractor in a ruined parade wagon is not evidence of anything. Owen looked at him, and for a moment he did not see a powerful man. He saw rot under paint. "A man's bank account doesn't decide whether he's telling the truth," he said. The words did not rise, they settled. Judge Samuel Price, attending as county mediator, removed his glasses and asked for the originals to be secured. The council voted to pause Ash Creek Landing pending review. Hale's face changed then, not dramatically, but enough. The room saw the seam. Ranger sat beside the table, Scout's old collar resting between his paws, silent as a witness from another time. The review did not move quickly, but truth rarely does once it enters a courthouse. It had to pass through clerks, sealed boxes, copied records, careful signatures, and men who suddenly wished they had remembered less. For 3 months, Mercy Bend lived in an uneasy quiet. Ash Creek Landing disappeared from the banners along Main Street. Victor Hale's office stayed open, but the brass nameplate lost its shine under fingerprints and dust. People still greeted him when they had to, though their voices had changed. Not colder, more awake. County investigators found what Eleanor Briggs had written down 19 years earlier. Duplicate fees, altered filing dates, transfers hidden beneath company names that sounded different, until the ownership papers led back to the same family. Hale did not fall in a single dramatic moment. He stepped down from committees, lost contracts, faced lawsuits, signed settlements that returned several parcels near Ash Creek to a public trust. That was how the town watched power shrink. Not in a blaze, but line by line, page by page, until the man who had once decided other people's worth had to answer for his own handwriting. Owen followed the process from the repaired Caravan, which now stood under a timber shelter built by volunteers beside the creek. He had added a small stove, a fold-down desk, shelves for maps, and a bench wide enough for Ranger to sleep on when the afternoon heat slowed him. Mara had polished the old iron fittings, but left the dents. "Scars are records," she said, and Owen liked that enough to say nothing. On the wall above the desk hung his father's walnut rule. Beneath it, in a simple frame Nora Pike made from library scrapwood, sat Eleanor's words, "No one is surplus." People began coming on Saturdays. Not crowds, just enough. A retired mechanic with a deed he could not read. A waitress trying to understand a notice from the county. A veteran who had slept in his truck for 2 nights and apologized before asking where to start. Owen learned to hate that apology most of all. He would slide a chair out, pour coffee, and say, "Start where it started." Ranger greeted each person at the step, calm and solemn, then returned to the walnut box where Scout's old collar rested. Sometimes a visitor touched the collar and asked about it. Owen would tell the story plainly. Two people who believed dignity could be organized, a dog who guarded their work, a caravan built to carry help down bad roads. He never made the story bigger than it was. It was big enough. Mara opened her shop twice a month to teach repairs people could do with borrowed tools. How to brace a step, patch a sill, red rot, measure square. Franklin Reed helped label the old Ash Creek maps. Louise brought food and pretended, as always, that she had cooked too much. Deputy Grace Weller stopped by one evening after shift, stood beside the caravan, and said she was glad the county had sold it cheap. Owen looked at the fresh canvas glowing in the copper light and smiled a little. "Best $20 I ever spent." She laughed softly, but her eyes stayed serious. Near the end of spring, Mercy Bend Commons opened on the recovered land. No ribbon-cutting spectacle, no polished speech pretending the town had always been kind. Just folding chairs, coffee, legal aid forms, repair sign-up sheets, and the old pioneer caravan at the center of it all. No longer a relic, no longer a shelter only for one man, but a doorway. Owen stood on its back step with Ranger pressed against his leg. He saw Mara by the tool table, Nora sorting files, Franklin talking with a young county clerk who listened without impatience. The creek moved through the grass beyond them, carrying sunlight in broken pieces. Owen thought of the night outside Bell's garage, the duffel at his feet, the shame sitting hot in his chest. He had believed then that he had no place. Now he understood a place was not always something handed to you. Sometimes you built it from what others mocked. Sometimes a dog found the seam. Sometimes an old floor opened, and beneath it waited not gold, not luck, but a reason to stand straighter. If this story reminded you that no one should be judged by what they've lost, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. Tell us in the comments which moment stayed with you most and where you're watching from tonight.